I learned early that my family loved results more than people. Not loudly, not cruelly in a way that left bruises, just enough to make the rules clear and permanent. This is a story created by the author of the Family Afterlight channel for educational and inspirational purposes, and it does not portray any specific real-life individual. My father liked to talk about potential at the dinner table. He used the word the way other men used faith, something you either had or didn't. My brother Logan always had it. I never seemed to. Logan thinks big. My father, Douglas Morrison, would say, cutting his food with careful precision. That's what separates leaders from everyone else. My mother, Paula, nodded like this was a neutral observation, not a verdict. I sat across from them, hands folded, listening the way I'd been taught. If I spoke too quickly, I was impatient. If I waited, I was passive. Silence was safer. One night, when I was still in high school, I mentioned I'd done well on a math exam. Not perfect, just well. My father didn't look up. Consistency matters more than one good score. He said, "Anyone can get lucky once." Logan laughed. "She's always been good at tests. That doesn't mean much in the real world." My mother smiled at me, soft and apologetic. "Your brother just means you shouldn't get comfortable." That word again. Comfortable. It followed me like a warning label. When Logan failed a class, it became a story about pressure and unfair professors. When I struggled, it became a lesson about effort. The difference was never explained. It didn't need to be. At family gatherings, my father introduced Logan with pride. "He's working on something big." That phrase did a lot of work, no details required. When people asked what I did, my mother answered for me. "She's very steady," she said. "Always been practical." Practical meant invisible. I didn't argue. I didn't compete. I learned how to listen for the subtext in every conversation. Praise was currency, silence was debt, and I was always behind. Once, during a holiday dinner, my aunt asked why I didn't take more risks. Before I could answer, my father said, "Not everyone is built for that. Someone has to keep the lights on." Logan smirked. "She's our backup plan." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. That was part of the job. Later that night, my mother found me washing dishes alone. "You know your father worries," she said gently. "He just wants you to be stronger." I kept my eyes on the sink. "I am strong." She touched my arm, then pulled her hand back like she'd crossed a line. "You're sensitive. That's not the same thing." That was the moment it settled into something solid. I wasn't failing. I was already defined. From then on, I stopped offering pieces of myself that would never be received. I focused on school, on work, on building a life that didn't require applause. I learned how to be useful without being seen. If you've ever felt like you had to earn your place in your own family, you already know how this part feels. Stay with me. What comes next is not about winning. It's about what happens when you finally stop playing the role they assigned you. By the time we were both adults, the pattern had stopped pretending to be fair. Logan moved through life like doors were designed to open for him. When they did, my father called it confidence. When they didn't, he called it bad timing. Either way, Logan was never responsible for the outcome. I learned that lesson at a family dinner the year Logan decided college wasn't for him. "I don't need a classroom to tell me how to think," Logan said, leaning back in his chair. "I learn faster by doing." My father nodded immediately. "That's instinct. You can't teach that." My mother looked at me, as if waiting for my reaction. I kept my face neutral. "So, what's the plan?" she asked Logan. "I've been talking to a guy in real estate," he said. "He sees potential." That word again. My father smiled like he'd heard proof of a genius. "We'll help you get started," my father said. "Sometimes you have to invest early." No one asked where the money would come from. It was understood. A few months later, Logan's first deal fell apart. He missed a deadline, misread a contract, blamed the seller. At dinner, He told the story like a war injury. Everyone messes up their first time, my father said. That's how you learn. When I brought up my own work a week later, it landed differently. I had just accepted a full-time role in compliance analysis. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid consistently. I mentioned it carefully, the way I'd learned to. My father frowned. That sounds safe. It is, I said. It's stable. Too stable, Logan added. You'll get stuck. My mother tried to soften it. He just doesn't want you settling. Settling. Another word that never applied to Logan. Over the years, the gap widened. Logan moved from one opportunity to the next, each one funded by patients I was never offered. When his finances tightened, my parents called it a rough patch. When mine stayed balanced, they called it lack of ambition. Once, after Logan lost a large sum on a deal he barely explained, my father said, "At least he's trying." I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. At another gathering, my father pulled me aside. "You should learn from your brother," he said. "He understands risk." "I understand consequences," I replied. He laughed, not unkindly. "That's the problem. You're always thinking about what could go wrong." Logan overheard and grinned. "That's why she needs us." Needs us. The word settled between us like a verdict. I realized then that effort would never be enough. The rules weren't written for me to win. They were written to keep the story consistent. Logan was the future. I was the insurance. And insurance only mattered when something went wrong. So I stopped trying to be impressive. I focused on being prepared. I didn't know yet what I was preparing for. I just knew it wouldn't involve asking them for anything again. I built my adult life quietly, the way you do when you're used to being evaluated instead of supported. I worked in regulatory risk and compliance, the kind of job people only notice when something goes wrong. I learned systems, controls, documentation. I learned how to see problems before they turned expensive. It paid steadily. It didn't sparkle. And in my family, that meant it didn't count. At a birthday dinner for my father, someone asked what I was working on. Before I could answer, my mother said, "She's in one of those analysis roles, very technical." My father nodded. "Important work, just not very visible." Logan raised his glass. "That's her brand, reliable." I smiled because that was expected. A few minutes later, Logan launched into a story about a property he was about to close. "It's not finalized yet," he said, enjoying the attention. "But if it goes through, it could change everything." My father leaned forward. "That's the risk you take. Big upside." I watched the familiar rhythm play out. No one asked about contingencies. No one asked what would happen if it failed. That part was assumed to be someone else's problem. When Logan's deal collapsed 2 months later, my parents didn't mention it. They spoke instead about resilience. "He'll bounce back," my mother said. "He always does." When I mentioned a promotion review at work, my father tilted his head. "Still the same company." "Yes," I said. "They value consistency." "That can be dangerous," Logan said. "You don't want to waste your prime years." My mother looked at me with concern. "Your brother just wants you to want more." More meant louder. More meant visible. More meant him. The only person who noticed the imbalance was Sloane. She was younger than Logan, married to an engineer named Noah, and observant in a way that didn't demand attention. One night, after everyone else drifted into smaller conversations, she sat beside me. "They talk about him like he's already succeeded," she said quietly. "And about you like you're still deciding." I shrugged. "That's the story they like." She studied my face. "It's not the truth." That was new. Not comfort, not advice, just acknowledgement. At the next family gathering, my father pulled me aside again. "You're capable," he said, "but you play too small." "I play within reality," I replied. He sighed, as if disappointed. "That's exactly what worries me. I understood then that no amount of competence would change the hierarchy. I could be steady forever and still be considered temporary. Logan could fail repeatedly and still be seen as inevitable. So I stopped explaining my choices. I stopped correcting their assumptions. I focused on building a life that didn't rely on being understood by people who had already decided what I was worth. The call came on a Tuesday morning, which somehow made it worse. No warning, no build-up. Just a calendar invite labeled Company Update and a room full of people pretending not to look at one another. The executive spoke carefully, like every word had been approved by a lawyer. Regulatory pressure, restructuring, wind down. The severance package was brief and final. A few weeks of pay, access cut by the end of the day. When the meeting ended, no one lingered. There was nothing to say. I packed my desk in silence and drove home, doing the math the way I always did. Rent, utilities, insurance, groceries. The numbers didn't panic me at first. I had savings. Not much, but enough to buy time. Then my car stalled at a light on the way to a second interview 2 days later. The engine coughed, shuddered, and died like it had been waiting for permission. The mechanic didn't soften it. "It's not a quick fix," he said. "You're looking at several thousand. More if you wait." I didn't tell him I couldn't wait. Days blurred into applications and polite rejections. Some interviews went well, then went quiet. Recruiters stopped returning calls. Each week thinned my account a little more. Each problem arrived with friends. I told myself I just needed a bridge. That was all. Something temporary. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time before calling my parents. I rehearsed the words until they sounded reasonable. I didn't ask for money. I asked for space. My father answered. I lost my job. I said, the company shut down. I'm interviewing, but things are tight. I was wondering if I could stay for a few weeks, just until I get back on my feet. There was a pause. Then he laughed. "This is what happens when you don't take risks," he said. "You get comfortable. Then reality shows up. I'm not asking forever," I said. "Just temporarily." "You're an adult," he replied. "You should have prepared better." My mother took the phone. Her voice was softer, practiced. "I'm sorry you're stressed. That sounds hard. That's it?" I asked. She hesitated. "Your father's right. We can't keep rescuing you." Rescuing. As if I'd ever been carried. They ended the call like a conclusion had been reached. I waited another day before calling Logan. I already knew how it would go. I called anyway. "So you're unemployed now," he said, stretching the word. "That tracks. I need a small loan." I said, "Just enough to fix the car." He laughed. "You know what your problem is? You never humbled yourself." There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, as if he were offering mercy. "I might have something for you. Clerical work at one of my places. $8 an hour. It's honest. I'm not doing that." I said, "You should be grateful," he replied. "This could build character." I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by unopened mail and the sound of my own breathing. I realized something had cracked. Not all at once, but enough to let the truth through. I wasn't failing. I was finally seeing the limits of who I could rely on. I waited one more night before calling Sloane, not because I thought she wouldn't help, but because asking her felt different. With my parents, I'd asked out of habit. With Logan, out of desperation. With Sloane, it felt like crossing a line I didn't want to cross unless I had no choice. When she answered, I didn't soften anything. I lost my job. I said, "My car's not running. I'm almost out of money." There was no pause, no sigh. "Where are you?" she asked. "At home." "Pack a bag," she said. "You can stay with us. I don't know how long." "That's not a condition." She said, "Just come." When I arrived, Noah was already in the driveway. Hood of my car open like it had always been part of the plan. He wiped his hands on a rag and nodded once. "We'll get it moving," he said. "Might take a bit." I waited for the questions, the timeline, the quiet judgment. None of it came. Sloane showed me the spare room and said, "Bathroom's down the hall. Eat when you're ready." Then she left me alone. That night, my phone buzzed. My mother. "You didn't tell us you were moving," she said. I didn't move. I replied, "I needed somewhere to stay. You could have figured something out." She said, "Running to other people isn't healthy." I closed my eyes. "You laughed when I asked." She lowered her voice, as if that changed the memory. "Your father didn't mean it like that." Logan texted an hour later. "You know that offer's still open. $8 is better than nothing." I didn't respond. The next morning, my father called. "So," he said, "you're staying with your sister now." "With Sloane." I corrected. He ignored that. "This isn't a solution. It's enabling." She didn't lecture me. I said, "She helped. You're confusing comfort with progress." He replied, "No," I said quietly. "I'm recognizing respect." He hung up. Over the next few days, something unfamiliar settled in. Not relief, not happiness. Space. Noah fixed what he could on the car and explained what couldn't be rushed. Sloane stocked the fridge without comment. No one asked me what my plan was. No one reminded me how temporary my welcome should feel. One evening, as we ate quietly, Sloane said, "You don't have to prove anything here." The words landed harder than I expected. "I'm not used to that," I said. She nodded. "I know." A week later, my mother showed up unannounced. She stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the house like she was measuring something invisible. "You look tired," she said. "This has been hard on all of us." "All of us," I repeated. She clasped her hands. "Your father thinks you're avoiding responsibility." I met her gaze. I asked for a place to sleep. "You said no." She shook her head. "We said you needed to learn." "I learned," I said. "Who not to call." Her face tightened. "You're being unfair." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate." She left without saying goodbye. That night, lying in a room that wasn't mine but felt safer than any place I'd ever lived, I understood something I hadn't before. I hadn't been asking my family for help. I'd been asking for permission to exist without earning it. Living with Sloane and Noah didn't feel like being rescued. It felt like being allowed to stand still without being evaluated. I woke early out of habit and spent my mornings applying for work, contract roles, short-term projects, anything that fit what I knew how to do. I kept a spreadsheet the way I always had: dates, contacts, follow-ups. Control lived in details. Noah noticed once and said, "You don't need to justify your days to us." "I know." I said, and I did. That was the difference. When the car was ready enough to drive again, Noah handed me the keys without ceremony. "It'll get you where you need to go," he said. "We'll fix the rest later." "Thank you," I said. He shrugged. "It's just work." My parents called less when they realized I wasn't coming back. When they did, the tone shifted. "You sound calmer," my mother said once. "That worries me. I'm focused." I replied, "You should come home." She said, "This can't be permanent." "I'm not asking it to be." I said, "I'm building something." She sighed, the way she always did when she wanted me to soften. "Your father thinks you're drifting." "He's wrong," I said. After that, the calls thinned to texts, neutral ones. Updates about Logan, invitations phrased like obligations. Logan reached out one afternoon. "Dad says you're hiding." "I'm working." I replied, "You always say that." I didn't answer. One evening, Sloane sat across from me at the kitchen table. "You don't owe them updates," she said, "or progress reports." "I know," I said. "I just don't want to create more noise." She considered that. Sometimes silence is the boundary. That stuck. Weeks passed. I took on short projects and finished them cleanly. I paid Sloan back for groceries without being asked. She noticed and pushed the money back once. "This isn't a transaction," she said. "I need it to be balanced," I replied. She smiled, not offended. "I get that." When my father finally called again, his voice was firm. "You need to start thinking long-term." "I am," I said. "Then you should stop depending on other people." "I'm not," I said. "I'm recovering." He paused. "From what?" "From learning that help always comes with a cost," I said. He ended the call without comment. That night, I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet. No one demanded a timeline. No one measured my worth. For the first time, stability wasn't something I had to defend. It was something I was allowed to build. The scratch ticket sat in my wallet for 2 days before I checked it. Not because I believed it mattered, but because habits don't disappear just because your life is unstable. I bought it at a convenience store on the way back from a contract meeting, slid it into the same pocket where I kept receipts, and forgot about it. When I finally looked, I didn't react the way people imagine. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe faster. I checked the numbers once, then again, then set the ticket down on the table. $4.8 million. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in the wallet. Then I sat there until the room felt normal again. The first person I called was a lawyer whose name I found through a professional referral. He listened without interrupting. "You need to treat this like a security issue," he said, "not a windfall." That made sense. He explained the process calmly. Taxes, trusts, privacy options. He confirmed that after everything settled, the amount would be closer to $3 million. Enough to change a life, not enough to make mistakes. "Do not tell anyone," he said. "Not yet. I wasn't planning to," I replied. I didn't tell Sloan. I didn't tell Noah. I went to work the next day and finished a report that paid exactly what it was supposed to pay. I drove the same car. I ate the same food. Nothing visible changed. A week later, my mother called. "Your father says you sound distracted," she said. "I'm busy," I replied. "With what work?" She hesitated. "Logan could use your focus right now. He's dealing with a lot." I closed my eyes. "I'm not available." Her voice cooled. "That's not how family works. It is for me," I said. I met with a financial advisor recommended by the lawyer. No small talk, no jokes. We talked about risk, not reward. I explained what I wanted. "I don't want this to make noise," I said. "I want it to give me time." He nodded. "Then you don't spend it. You structure it." That became the rule. I set up a trust. I separated accounts. I documented everything. The money existed, but it didn't touch my daily life. Control mattered more than comfort. When Logan texted, I didn't answer. When my father emailed about long-term planning, I archived it. One evening, Noah asked how work was going. "Steady," I said. He smiled. "That's good." Sloan watched me for a moment. "You're different," she said. "Am I?" "You're quieter," she said, "but not tired." I nodded. That was accurate. That night, I locked the documents away and turned off my phone. For the first time, I understood the shape of power. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It waited until everything around it stopped trying to control it. By the time they started calling again, I had already learned the difference between concern and curiosity. Concern asks how you're doing. Curiosity asks what you have. My mother was the first to test the door. "You've been quiet," she said. "We worry." "I'm fine," I replied. "That's vague." She said, "Your father thinks you're shutting us out." "I'm busy," I said. "That hasn't changed." She paused, then softened her voice. "Logan could use your guidance. You've always been good at details." Details. The word felt calculated. A week later, my father invited me to dinner. Not asked. Invited. Like I was being summoned back into a role. I agreed. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed clarity. Logan arrived early and loud, talking about a project that was about to break through. He looked at me with a grin that carried history. Still keeping things small, he asked. "I'm working," I said. My father leaned back in his chair. "That's what worries me. You never show ambition. I show restraint," I replied. My mother stepped in quickly. "Let's not make this tense." Logan laughed. "It's not tense. It's honest. She's always been careful." Careful. Another word that meant limited when applied to me. Dinner continued like a performance. My father listed Logan's setbacks as temporary. My mother reframed them as stress. When I didn't contribute, the silence grew pointed. Finally, my mother said it. "Now that you're stable, it's time to think about family." I set my fork down. "You laughed when I asked for a place to sleep." My father stiffened. "That was discipline. It was dismissal," I said. Logan rolled his eyes. "You're holding on to that. I'm remembering it," I said. My mother reached across the table. "We did what we thought was best. You did what was easiest," I replied. The room went quiet. Not stunned. Calculating. My father spoke next. "You have skills. Resources. Logan needs support. I'm not his safety net." I said, "He's your brother." My mother said, "And I'm not your project," I replied. Logan leaned forward. "You think you're above us now?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done being beneath you." My father stood. "If you walk away again, don't expect to be welcomed back." I stood too. I wasn't. My mother's voice broke. "You're tearing this family apart." I picked up my coat. "You did that when love became conditional." As I reached the door, Logan called after me. "You'll regret this." I turned back once. I already regretted staying. I left without slamming the door. I didn't need to. Later that night, my phone lit up with messages, questions, accusations, appeals disguised as apologies. I read none of them. I blocked the numbers and set the phone face down. When I got back to Sloane's, she looked at me carefully. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm clear," I said. She nodded, as if that was the answer she'd been waiting for. That night, I slept without rehearsing conversations that would never change. I had finally understood what they were asking for. It wasn't connection. It was access. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments, passed through other people, softened by distance. Sloane told me first. "Logan's deals are unraveling," she said carefully. "There are complaints." I nodded. That was always going to happen. My mother tried one last time. She left a voicemail, her voice unsteady. "You don't have to like what we did, but you don't get to abandon family when things get hard." I didn't call back. Weeks later, a number I didn't recognize came through. I answered out of habit. "Ms. Morrison," a man said. "I'm calling from the State Financial Crimes Unit. Your name came up in relation to your brother's business. I'm not involved." I said, "We know." He replied, "You declined to intervene." "Yes," I said. "I did." There was a pause, then a quiet acknowledgement. "That matters." After that, the noise faded. Logan stopped reaching out. My parents stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Silence replaced entitlement, and for the first time, it didn't feel like punishment. I moved into a small place not far from Sloane's neighborhood, nothing extravagant, just mine. When my mother sent an invitation to a family gathering, I archived it without opening. One evening, Sloane sat with me on the couch and said, "You know, some people will hear this story and recognize themselves in it." "I know," I said. "They might need to hear how it ends," she added. I thought about that later, alone, lights low, the quiet uninterrupted. I hadn't destroyed anything. I hadn't taken revenge. I had simply removed myself from a system that only worked when I stayed small. If you're listening and this feels familiar, stay with that feeling. You're not imagining it, and you're not alone. I didn't win anything back. I stopped giving access to people who only knew how to take.